and welcome to GAAGO Analysis Show. We're now on episode 4. But before we move on to talk about some of the content, we'll briefly discuss, we had a special guest last week, which our producer Carlow is going to put up on screen now, and show this moment that everybody wanted to see again. So this is Daddy Séamus mode. Look.
Yeah. You're his favourite player now, Noel.
Just had a dust off from Limerick.
Yeah.
So,
I've sent him for ice cream today. He's got for ice cream. It's all good.
So with that in mind, with our special guest finishing with us last week, we actually have another special guest this week. He has big boots to fill. Certainly has big boots to fill after that. After 2 All-Irelands, 2 Munsters, an All Star, I think he scored 8 goals and 110 points in 11 seasons. That's 8 goals and 110 points more than I've scored. And one less for you, Séamus. I'm delighted to welcome Bubbles to the show. Bubbles, how's it going?
Not too bad, Nolly. Thanks for that introduction. I didn't know any of them facts myself, but yeah, big boots to fill. Unsurprising though that Séamus' little lad was wearing a Limerick jersey. You know, any chance Séamus gets, he usually wears a bit of green, but no green today, which is good to see.
You still have to get a picture in the background. So look over Séamus' left shoulder. You'll see the picture.
I don't know what's that. So, 90% of my wardrobe is green, Bubbles. I'm not going to lie. It's the truth.
So we'll get stuck into it because we actually have a good bit of content to cover this week. So firstly, obviously, we're delighted to have you on the show, Bubbles, just because Séamus and myself are obviously cornerbacks. Well, we try to be anyway. But it's great to kind of get a different perspective because obviously forwards naturally think very differently than what backs do. We're probably simpler in the way we think, whereas forwards are always quite off the cuff. Well, certainly you were when you were playing. So it'll be interesting to get your perspective on it and maybe a lens from a forward. But go on if you want to.
No, work away. I suppose the only thing about forwards is probably not as hardy as the backs, like, and stuff like that. So just. I'd probably be more looking at space instead of tackles and things. So that might be the only different perspective I'd have. I
don't know about that. You hit me a few times over the years, and it didn't feel too soft at the time. I won't lie.
Yeah, trying to run away from you then was the key after that.
And mate, you know what? That might tee us up lovely to the first point that we have. So Séamus is going to start this week just to kind of change it up, and Séamus is going to talk through kind of the last few minutes of what was an absolute epic battle in Cork.
Yeah, so like Bubbles, you were there in Cork, right? And like the game, the way it is panned out, the way we were looking at it at half time, Cork were 8 points up, but we knew there was a kick in Limerick. Limerick had this history, right, of turning halftime deficits into, sometimes a rollicking win. Like, so what we were looking at in the second half, and we're going to look at the clips here, was Limerick had whittled it down bit by bit, score by score, and then rocked Cork for 2 goals. And in the 65th minute, right, there's a puck out from Nicky Quaid, right? It comes down here. It's won here by Gillan. Gillan fires it out to Hegarty, right? And he puts it over. So that's 4 points up, 65 minutes gone. What do you think is happening in this game? What do you think?
Well, I think what Nicky Quaid is doing there is for the first one there, he's going as long as possible because Hegarty at the time was actually moved into the inside line. Like, it's something that Limerick are trying a bit now this year, is moving him inside. And at the time, Aaron Gillan, I think, was gone off. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe he was just inside. But Aaron Gillan did come off, and I thought he was just trying to hit him. And then he actually wasn't gone off. He actually laid the hand pass off to Hegarty.
Yeah.
But I think it was just trying to hit Hegarty because Hegarty was having a stormer of a second half, and it was just to try and put the full back line of Cork under pressure because they were under pressure kind of all game. They made a few mistakes, and I think it was just trying to get the ball as long as possible.
And I think that was it, right? So the momentum was with Limerick. They were gone 4 points up. Heggo's after doing the damage. So look for Heggo again long, right? So this is what he's after doing here when we roll it on. He's after going long, and he's after going down the side. Again, looking towards Gillan, Hegarty, right? But what I found is, right, so Cork needed players to stand up, and who I thought was exceptional was Brian Hayes. Brian Hayes goes back from corner forward to pick up a ball, finds Sean O'Donoghue, right? So we were talking about cornerbacks, Mikey Butler last week for Kilkenny, going forward with the ball. But in this kind of a situation, right, 3 points down, he's got the ball on the stick. Look at the delivery of the ball here, right? So he's got 3 Limerick defenders to spray the ball in between, and the ball to Connolly is class. Outside left hand, and he goes at Morrissey. Like, if you got a ball like that, like, what are you doing with that?
Well, at that time, it had to be a goal chance. Like, Connolly had to take on his man. If it was anybody else other than Sean O'Donoghue that got that ball coming forward, it probably would have been a shot for a score. But because Sean O'Donoghue was a corner back and he didn't want to take the chance because Cork were down, he delivered the ball in. And as you said, a top-class ball. The hardest ball for the defender to defend is outside left shoulder coming across the field and stepping back in. So Connolly done the right thing there. Just too many bodies around. Goal chance kind of went and he took his point.
Yeah, and Morrissey, like, so for me, winning a ball off Dan Morrissey isn't easy. And I thought he was, of the Limerick backs at the weekend, he was probably consistent from start to finish. He wasn't caught for much. But anyway, as we roll it on here then, right, so Patrick Collins is, after having a bit of bad luck with the short puck outs, conceded the 2 goals, right? But he's brave. He backs himself and he backs what they've been doing, trying to vary it up. The long puck out wasn't as effective in the second half. So he finds Sean O'Donoghue. Gillan is tired. The press isn't there. But here we have the matchup that I thought was key in the last 10 minutes, right? Was this Brian Hayes and Fergal O'Connor? That's the reason I highlighted him earlier, right? He's a guy who's been on the cusp for Cork. You know, he hasn't lit it up scoreboard wise, but I think he's got savage potential, right? When he catches this ball, he's even got his body turned inside O'Connor, and O'Connor now is out on the sideline side, and he's got one thought, and he's going straight, right? And O'Connor has him pulled back, but even to get the pass away, I thought was class, because it gave Alan Connolly inside a chance for a goal. And, you know, for me, then that was the tide really shifting back towards Cork. And then, like, so we're talking about the end game here now, okay? So low free again from Burnsy. Burnsy just hasn't been hitting him that great. But Adam English, he's an absolute wizard when he comes on for Limerick in the last 3 games. While I'm highlighting the 3 guys here, O'Dowlig, Cian Lynch, Séamus Flanagan, keep an eye on them, right? Because Limerick are going to get a score here, but they're responsible for setting up for the puck out, right? Aidan O'Connor, after coming on one of his first championship appearances, incredible score. Patrick Collins goes straight to the umpire. The ball isn't even over the bar. He's got the ball from the umpire in his hand. Our producer spotted very well. Watch the other umpire. The umpire throws a ball at him. But Shane Kingston makes a dart, right, from the half-forward line. Colin O'Neill is supposed to be marking him. And our 3 boys, O'Dowlig, Lynch, and Séamus Flanagan are there. The call comes late to Flanagan. Okay, so our setup isn't good. That's first and foremost. And what it does now, it puts Limerick in a bind here, right? So Flanagan is chasing, but he's not going to catch Kingston because Kingston's too fast. O'Neill is 15 yards off him, and he knows he's going to run at him. And the rest of it, to me, like a tired tackle, pace in, and then Diarmaid Byrnes flat-footed over the head. Nightmare stuff for a defender. And then Kyle Hayes is in the white helmet going forward, but the 2 people we've highlighted here is Colin O'Neill on the left in yellow, Fergal O'Connor on the right. Kyle Hayes had cover. He makes a decision, right? And this new rule, this is what the rule is for. This is, Kyle Hayes makes a decision to say, I don't want you to shoot on goal. There's no chance. But what he really does, he gives Hoggy a free shot from the 21. And to me, that's the deciding the game. That right there, when he finishes it, that decides the game. It's in 73 minutes, 4 minutes added. So, like, for you there, the black card and the decision by Hayes, like, as a forward, do you like that rule? Do you think that situation was perfect, or what do you think?
Look, we Tipperary benefited that from a couple of years ago when the rule first came in against Clare down the Gaelic ground. Jake Morris is pulled down right on the sideline inside the 21. We got a penalty over it, and we ended up winning the game. But for me, forget about the black card rule for a minute. Colin O'Neill should have been the person dragging down Shane Kingston there. He shouldn't have got as far as Kyle Hayes. And look, we don't like cynical play. We don't like any of this stuff. But being right, Colin O'Neill, end of the game, Limerick were 4 points up at that stage, or 2 points up, I think. He should have been the man ripping down Shane Kingston. Because if he does, it's either a score over the bar or they're lobbing the ball in. 9 times out of 10, when you lob a ball into the square, the defence comes out with it. So Colin O'Neill probably should have been the one to do it. Diarmaid Byrnes probably wasn't in a position to do it, as he was so flat-footed and he didn't know what way that Shane Kingston was going to go. And he probably had the last thing that he do was throw the ball over his head. So for Kyle Hayes for me done the right thing. The black card, getting onto the black card, then I thought there was cover there looking back at it. Then again, it's probably the right decision from the referee as well. Like, there's questions from both sides. Like, was it a black card, and then from the opposite side, then Cork will say that it was a black card. You can argue both sides of the case for both teams here, but if you're looking at referees by the letter of the law, he probably made the right decision.
It's funny the difference.
The obvious follow-on question here now, and this is not to try and like create any kind of divide. If that was any other player apart from Kyle Hayes, would have been a black card.
No, entire 100%.
Yeah.
Like that's a stone wall. So like I've been critical of this situation in the past where it's been borderline. That to me was a stone wall, no doubt situation. And regardless of who's doing it. What I was looking at was the personnel at the start and at the end of that play, right? So at the start, Flanagan isn't a half forward. Not for Limerick. He plays there for Fiona Castleman, but he's not in that Limerick setup as a half forward. He doesn't make a break for the wing. O'Dowlig isn't a half forward. He doesn't make a break for the wing. Lynch is a centre forward. He doesn't make a break for the wing. And so that whole side is exposed. So you personnel problem there. They took off Morrissey. They took off Gillan. So and Hegarty wasn't in that position. So
It's hard for I know what you're saying, Flanagan and O'Dowlig. Hard to get set though when the ball has just gone over the bar and Patrick Collins is thinking really, really quickly. And Shane Kingston is on the same wave. Shane Kingston doesn't want to get into a battle with Cathal O'Neill for a high puck out, that's for sure. So that's where Shane Kingston wanted to be. So I wouldn't be too critical of Flanagan or O'Dowlig there. What I'd be saying is fair play to Patrick Collins and getting it out quickly. And I know John Kiley came out and said that the ball was barely over the bar and whatnot. But look, on the opposite side, if Nicky Quaid done it, he'd be applauding him.
Yeah.
So,
I know there wasn't a second whistle, like, so you're supposed to be a second whistle for the puck out, but it didn't.
Well, referees usually allow 7 to 8 seconds between puck outs, but at the end of the game, look, adrenaline doesn't go for players. Adrenaline goes for referees as well, I think. So he should have blown him back because he blew him back a couple of times in the second half. But look, it ended up making a great finish to the game.
Collins did exactly what he should. And then the other point then I was going to make at the end was that it's Fergal O'Connor at the other side. I think Sean Flynn's loss was huge. I think it kind of, especially as the second half wore on, I think to me, I thought that Sean Flynn in that full back line, the communication, normally when you're in that zone, and what we would have trained to do is the shout, you go, I cover, and you start that wheel and you start filling in positions behind. But that's purely a communication where you say, you go, I've got cover, but I don't know with Fergal in there, new guy, whether he actually got that shout. I don't know.
But even before we move on now, because Bubbles is going to highlight Harnedy and how impressed he was, I think you're dead right, Séamus. I'll tell you why. Because even if you look at that second last clip where the high ball was fielded over O'Connor, like he was trying to nearly out-muscle someone that was far too big for him. He was a foot above him and probably like 20, maybe 15 kilos heavier than him. Like as a back, if you're smaller, I can speak from experience. You wait last second and then you hit him. Like you don't try and like be on top of him and then try and out-muscle him. You wait last second, get the ball in the ground, you try and win it then. Anyway, Bubbles is laughing now because he's thinking.
I just follow on from that, Noel. I understand what you're saying, for Fergal O'Connor wrestling with him, but Fergal O'Connor is matching Sean Flynn and Mike Casey for the last 2 or 3 years, however long he's on the panel, doing that to taller forwards and coming out on top. The only difference is Sean Flynn and Mike Casey are a lot more physical than Fergal O'Connor at the minute because he's not new onto the panel. But if you're to look him up and look up at height, I'd say Fergal O'Connor is probably taller than the two lads.
Well, you could bench press the corner forward like Sean Flynn can.
Honestly, it's a scenario when you're probably like 15 plus kilos heavier and it's easier to stand your ground. Because that clip, it looked like O'Connor was actually going back the way when he was
backwards.
So it's a hard position to be in, and like again, it's just a small bit of inexperience, but I'm sure he'll learn. So you're going to talk to us about Séamus Harnedy and how impressed you were with him. Talk to us, Bubbles.
Yeah, I thought for Cork's puck out setup, for their own attacking puck out setup, Séamus Harnedy was the key. Now Declan Dalton and Séamus Harnedy both set up the same way, but because Harnedy is so key for him and so strong in the air, that's why like 90% of the puck outs went down top. But the first puck out went really, really long in on top of Brian Hayes. What's key here is Brian Hayes touching it down and not catching the ball. And then we see Barrett's run and Harnedy's run as both the exact same. All right, for the first puck. But this one here is the key. Séamus Harnedy set up 15 yards in behind Diarmaid Byrnes. And Diarmaid Byrnes didn't know what to do. And if you remember in the match, I don't know if it picked it up on the television, but Paul Kinnock came into Diarmaid Byrnes to try and change the setup of the Limerick puck out. And Pat Ryan went in and hit Paul Kinnock's shoulder to get him off the pitch because Séamus Harnedy was causing him so much trouble. Right? And this one then is different. They're both actually coming to the ball, but it's actually Declan Hannon that's on him here, and Diarmaid Byrnes was in no man's land because he didn't know what to do with Harnedy. And a small ball into Patrick Horgan. Again, look, set up in behind Diarmaid Byrnes here. Byrnes didn't know what to do. And as two defenders, I think the worst possible way to try and defend the ball and defend the forward is when a high ball is coming down top of you and the forward is behind you.
It's awful.
Yeah, for me, I love seeing that. Go ahead, Nolly.
The big thing there also is the zonal play. They overloaded on the left-hand side, whereas they knew that Kyle Hayes wasn't going to follow. So that allowed Decky Dalton to actually go under the puck out and Harnedy to go 15 yards back. So if they knew that Kyle Hayes wanted to stay in his own wing, it's very easy then to create the overload as players and just break it in behind. Harnedy didn't actually want to catch that ball. Decky Dalton didn't want to catch that ball. He merely wanted to break it in behind.
That's all, yeah. And I think Séamus Harnedy was directly involved in 16 puckouts for Cork over the course of the game. Like, that's a huge amount of puckouts for one player, and to be so effective. I think he won. I think it was 11 out of the 16. Now 16. It could be 14 to maybe 18 puckouts directly involved. But this one here, he doesn't catch this one cleanly. But again, Diarmaid Byrnes is in front of him. Declan Hannon is picking him up, but Declan Hannon leaves him off to contest coming from behind on top of Diarmaid Byrnes again, which is an absolute nightmare for a back. And he wins it, pops it off. Shane Barrett goes at the man again. And this one here, Declan Hannon again in a good position for a back. But Patrick Collins doesn't go as long with his puck out here. So he actually takes a bit off it. So the Séamus Harnedy is coming forward for the ball. So he actually set up for that puck out 10 yards inside the 45, and he picked it up 10 yards outside the 45. So it was just a different strategy just for that puck out. But Séamus Harnedy set the tone all day for Cork's own puck out in the way that he set up. And the biggest one was Shane Barrett's goal, where Limerick were just after scoring a goal. Diarmaid Byrnes comes up and hits Harnedy a shot into the back as a G up for Limerick.
That's right.
And Harnedy gets up, they have a little bit of a mouth off each other, and he sprints and gets under a puck out catch and hand pass off to Shane Barrett and a goal. Yeah. So Diarmaid Byrnes was targeted big time by Cork, and on the opposite side then, like what I suppose a lot of teams would have done with Padraig Maher for Tipperary back over the years when he was playing at 7, that every puck out was nearly going down the opposite side of the field, and that's what Cork tried to do on Saturday night, either go down on Séamus Harnedy's wing or go straight down the middle where Kyle Hayes wouldn't be directly involved in the play.
Yeah. And just for me, and having marked Séamus Harnedy, right? So when he's on song and when he's at his best, yeah, you can see it in the clips there, it's depth, right? So he pops up, right? He pops up in the 21 in space, he pops up in the 45 in a one-on-one, he pops up in the 65 coming short for ball. And as a defender, if you don't know the level, the depth that player is at, especially if they were doing an overload, one in front, one behind, you have to pick it. You have to pick your poison there. And to me, he got every one of those decisions right. Cork got 2-15 from their own puck out. That's outrageous to me, right? And it was the difference in the game. Like that's the one thing that they'll find it hard to repeat against Tip. But it was
that basically goes to show how dominant their half forward line were.
Yeah,
like we always talk about Limerick's dominance in midfield and in their half back line.
But it's how they did.
That stat, it's the opposite.
It's how they did. I thought it was madness. I thought it was madness hitting it long on Limerick. I genuinely did. I thought it was.
The puck out strategy here from Cork compared to the Clare game was huge because against Clare going man to man. So, for example, Diarmaid Ryan is picking up Harnedy, and on the opposite side, then you have McInerney picking up who was it, Declan Dalton again. But Cork were basing that around movement because they know the Clare are going to follow. So Cork had to come up with a completely new puck-out strategy because Limerick are static in their position. Not static, but they're structured in their positions of 5, 6, and 7, and they will not follow. Mm-hmm. So against Clare, 50 or 60% of their puck-outs could have been to Shane Barrett running into space. Yeah. Whereas at the weekend, Shane Barrett maybe got 1, if 2 or 3 puck-outs. So it was a different puck-out strategy.
They learned a lot from Waterford as well, Bubbles, because Waterford actually stayed zonal, and it caused Cork wicked upset, particularly in the first half. They just couldn't understand how they couldn't create space on one side or the other. But I think they learned a lot because it appeared that the overload really worked in favour of them. And what I'm going to just do a quick look at here is the goals, and you'll see the Cork goals in particular. it's what you said there. It's the timing really that has an impact on the success rate. Because you highlighted Séamus Harnedy. In this instance, I want to highlight Barrett. This is the 45, okay? Barrett sees that the ball is actually going to go over his head, and he's happy enough, right? When we talk about training, we're always talking about timing and trying to get on the ball at the right time. The ball is over his head. He only makes the run after the ball lands, and he breaks onto it. So it was all about timing. He didn't want to be under the puck out because he already knew Harnedy was going to be there, and he was hoping to get the break off. I'm not too worried that I don't want to discuss this sharp puck out. What I do want to discuss is the movement. If we look at the Limerick forwards here, right, they have 4 forwards, okay? The key thing for me is the directional move of all the forwards. They all move in different ways. So if we look, Tom Morrissey is there, he moves right. Gillan obviously goes straight. We have Flanagan out the far left. He actually goes out the way. And then Cian Lynch pulls people in a different direction. And that then naturally means there's an option on the outside, which results in a good goal. So I'm not worried about the sharp puck and it didn't work out. What I was very impressed with was the movement to pull the Cork players out of the way to create the opportunity.
Yeah, Cian Lynch's role there was key. Cian Lynch kind of stopped and then he went again. And if you were to look back at that, you probably would have thought that Cian Lynch was probably the pass instead of Séamus Flanagan, because he stopped and he went again and he was after building a bit of momentum. And he probably wouldn't have been stopped. Look, obviously Séamus Flanagan finished the goal, but Cian Lynch was probably an easier pass to make for an easier finish.
And he didn't give it to him because he was marked at that stage. You know, so even this, if we look at this puck again, here's Barrett. Okay, we're going to highlight Barrett here. We can see Kyle Hayes actually pointing over to say, you get Decky Dalton. He's going across that way. Okay, but we're not really too concerned with that at the minute. Let's watch him. 45. Lets the ball run over his head again. He sees the space on the right-hand side of the screen, and look at the movement inside here. No one in. The big thing for this was that was actually a hard enough shot to take on. But Bubbles, you probably know as a forward, if you hit the ball low, you're more than likely going to get a goal from it rather than if you go high. So it was his ability to hit the ball into the ground, but the movement was incredible. He saw the space and ran into the space.
Yeah, the finish was getting, and you'll see it later on again with Flanagan's goal. If you hit the ground, it's a lot harder for a goalkeeper to save. Now, Nicky Kelly could have saved that one. The ball kind of skidded or whatever, but Flanagan's one is probably a better example. But what's key there, we spoke about earlier on, was that was directly after the Cork goal, or the Limerick goal, and Séamus Harnedy again, who I highlighted earlier on. But if you watch that clip, Diarmaid Burns, after hitting him, didn't get within 5 yards of him.
Yeah,
and it was actually Barry Nash who contested the ball with Séamus Harnedy there. So Burns was in no man's land again, just after hitting Harnedy after Limerick getting a goal and Harnedy coming in, setting himself under the puck out.
Yeah, and you don't want your fullback. You don't want your fullback to take some puck outs. Like, you just don't want it.
The obvious thing here is that Cork had their homework done and they knew exactly who was going up and when they were going up. Because you don't necessarily make those runs that Barrett's are making for those 2 goals unless you know someone is going up. Because if you don't go up and you run inside, you look like some fool.
Yeah, we kind of had a similar enough plan against Limerick in 2021 in the first half. I contested a lot of the puckouts. I'd say I would have contested maybe 70 or 80% of them in the first half. But then there was 2 or 3 times where I kind of played it like Barrett there. I came out to the 45 and I went as long as possible, and I got a goal off one of them. And it was kind of similar. But then in the second half, then Limerick changed our structure around it then, and we got nothing off our own puck out. So it was kind of fairly similar. Shane Barrett wasn't tasked with contesting any puckouts at the weekend.
No. And does that make run the space?
Doesn't that make breaks easier though? Then when you know who's going up, you can gamble because he's up. I know it's going to break one way or the other.
You can gamble, but it's very hard to know. Like down at our own trainer now with our trainer Declan Fannin, he always says that 80%, so 40% goes in front, 40% goes behind, and the other 20% then goes either side. So Cork are obviously doing a good bit of work on that.
Yeah, this is the last clip we'll show on the goals. Okay, obviously the key thing here is Flanagan didn't want Coleman getting the ball. He's their go-to risky player. He's holding him. Obviously, then he sees that Coleman is out to making the run, but has confidence that Hegarty is actually going to turn over a ball here. Okay. As the play progresses, he doesn't actually want to engage. Like, he has the opportunity to run there and pick up the ball, but you know what? He says, I'm going to run into space here, and actually leave Hegarty get the ball, bring players towards Hegarty rather than him. And as a result of that, then he has space to hit into the ground. And that's what Bubbles basically said there. It's actually the ball to the ground is the hard one. And again, this is the last one we'll show on it actually. This is Flanagan on the 45. He's actually not been marked. Okay. So he knows that his role is to get into space and try and be an option if the ball goes inside. So if you watch where he ends up, you just question, say, like, who's actually marking?
Yes, Downey's left him, but yeah.
Yeah, because Downey was playing 6 and he was so critical for Cork all game, he was picking Flanagan at that stage, but the ball was coming down the middle. He wanted to get himself back into position and he just left Flanagan, who on the day was the most dangerous Limerick player, and he just glided in there. So, it would have been Rob Downey, but again, like, you probably want to get as close to Gerard Hegarty in that position from a Cork point of view, to try and stop him from winning the ball.
It's definitely something though, like that Cork's backs have slightly struggled with. And Séamus, you were on Co-Com and I heard you mention how tight they become, how narrow they come when they defend. That there's so much room on either side, left or right, of that, we'll say, line, that there's always opportunities. And that'd be the one thing that I'd be very fearful against Tipperary, is the fact that Tipperary, their vision, their hands are just some of the best in the country. That if an Noel and gets on the ball and he sees someone on the outside, he's just going to pop it there all day. So that's the one thing that for Cork I'd be slightly concerned for, because if one team will go to town on you when it comes to that, is actually Tipperary. Okay, the last...
Like Limerick didn't get a huge amount of joy from long against Cork. Like, so, like, the 2 short puckouts and to Sean O'Donoghue was when they turned them over. Outside of that, Hego came into it in a big way in the third quarter, we'll say. But outside of that, they really quieted a lot of, like, the Limerick's puckout stats will be ripping over them. Like, it's nothing like what you'd expect from them.
Okay, so we won't go into that because we'll be talking for another like 20 minutes on that. Okay, but the last one I wanted to show, I had the pleasure of being up in Carlow. Carlow Rising, as we can call it for the afternoon here. Okay, great match up in Cullen Park. But the key thing I wanted to look here at is the sweepers. Okay, so you can call it sweepers, you can call it extra men, you can call it whatever you want, extra defenders. The reality is Carlow played this incredibly well. So in the first half, they had the breeze with them, which was actually quite strong when you were at the match. So they played their captain, MacDonald. He was their extra defender a lot of the time. So he was quite offensive. In other words, he was quite attacking in the first half. So as you can see on the picture on the left, he actually sat in front of the D, which allowed him to get involved in a lot more play. Whereas in the second half, Kilkenny had the breeze. I know Carlow had an extra man at this stage, but MacDonald actually sat nearly on a 21 to try and cut out any space. Merely the fact that the ball was actually landing on the 21. So here we'll just show what we're talking about, just in more of a kind of visual clip. So this is where he occupied in the first half, okay, where he was trying to cover space. He was also trying to get involved in a lot more play. Whereas in the second half, he wasn't overly concerned about getting play. He was more concerned about trying to stop any ball that was coming in that could potentially lead to a goal. Okay, you can see him here, bottom or the top kind of right-hand part of the picture here. He circled. He actually sat that deep a lot of the time. Okay, and you'll see why. So when we look at the clips, he was absolutely incredible. Looking back at it. Okay, you can see here on the far side, they have Lawler. He sees that they have extra defenders or extra players on the far side. So he said, you know what, I know what the role is for today to make sure that TJ inside doesn't actually get the ball in. So he actually sits there. John Donnelly gets sucked towards the play. MacDonald says, you know what, that's not my job for today. I'm actually going to sit back in and cover. Okay, so as you can see, he moves back in. As the play progresses, because they have so many bodies back, Chris Nolan gets a block in. When the ball comes to a dead end, TJ, I think he actually hit this one wide potentially, but this is where he is sitting. And that's where he occupied all day. And it was a really important position for him. And I'll tell you why. As the clips roll on, he becomes someone that blocks or interrupts a lot of the Kilkenny play. So as you'll see it here, here's Murphy on the ball. He wants to get the ball off quick to runners. Tom Phelan runs across. But as you can see here, MacDonald sees what's happening. Okay, and what he wants to do is try and disrupt or try and stop Tom Phelan getting a good ball off. When the play progresses, he kind of shoulders him body to shoulder and basically disrupts a good ball going across. Here's another very simple example, okay? Looking for a ball up. TJ is on his own inside. McDonald doesn't actually want to engage with TJ because as a back, what you want to do is make the forward make the decision. So what he does is he shepherds him out, uses the sideline as an extra defender, and he actually gives a bad ball because there's so much pressure coming on.
That was perfect.
And over again. Another simple example, you'll see it here. He's actually they're circled. Okay, so he's also moving back. But if we watch his position for this play, if we let this play run, like this was him for the whole first half, up and down, over and back. He must have covered, I'd say, probably 10K in the first half alone. So he was on the right-hand side. He sees that there's some trouble coming from the far side. He sees TJ coming in. All of a sudden, he's sprinting over across to cover the extra man that's there. Great tackle. Throw the ball away. Free out.
And that was the setup from Carlow all day. They were just trying to prevent Kilkenny from scoring goals. So TJ was isolated inside one-on-one, and Kevin MacDonald there all game. He didn't care what happened as long as they don't concede a goal. They don't concede a goal, potentially they stay in the game.
100%. And they done it so well that even because Kevin knew that he was going to be nearly an extra defender a lot of times, he often popped up for quick pockets. So he wasn't happy enough just to sit in the pocket. Like the traditionalists will think that, oh yeah, being an extra defender is just getting on spare ball or someone throws back a ball. It's actually, there's a lot more into it than just saying like, I'm going to sit at the edge of the D now and go over and back. Like position, walking, all that stuff is hugely important.
You saw how influential Owen Wall was. So Kilkenny had success, when they did have success, was out wide, right? And was spraying it away from the middle where MacDonald was. So but Owen Wall had a cracking first half, really, really good. So he won 4 from play. And then on to like the second half where he was sitting, I didn't think Owen Wall pucked 2 balls in the second half, and he was actually replaced 15 minutes into the second half. Now I know he was operating in a 2-man line when they lost a player, but for me, Carlow got that bang on.
Yeah. I think the difference there is in the first half when Kilkenny had 15, I think MacDonald was just playing per se as a normal sweeper, we'd say a traditional sweeper. In the second half, when Carlow had the extra man, he was more so marking space, or he was just covering space more so than actually playing a sweeper role. So it's kind of Waterford-esque of what Waterford kind of do. Waterford don't play a sweeper anymore. They play a man who's covering space to stop a ball going into an inside forward. So I think Kevin MacDonald played that really well in the second half, and to be able to swap it up, it was good from a player point of view. I don't know if that came from management or whether it was Kevin MacDonald himself that changed that.
Yeah, and do you know what? That actually leads us on to the last kind of set of clips, which is the more defensive sweeper. So in this instance, you'll see the position of the extra man. Now, a lot of time it was Kevin, but it varied depending on like who he was handing across. Okay, so you can see him here. He kind of stood there just for the puck out. But if we watch the play and it progresses, you'll see him. He actually is running back once it breaks down, and he's in there essentially to make sure that Keogh or whoever's in there at the time doesn't get the little slip ball through, because that's exactly what's on. But when they look up and they see Blanchfield sees that there's someone covering, he has to go long. And I think it was 17 wides Kilkenny had, like 17, which is incredible. Here you can see it again. They done this over and over and over again. It's like traditional Kilkenny when, as you said earlier on, Bubbles, Kilkenny kind of had this thing of where they know they play through the lines. But this went back to their old school, like get the ball in long and try and win possession. So they're very fortunate here, but they play the ball out. This is all in one play. So he's there on his own. You can see Carlow still have 3 bodies back just because the play. As it progresses, 10 seconds later, the same thing again. Back in, the extra man is back much deeper. Kevin is on his own. He has 45 yards of room to play around with.
Yeah, the ball in was so poor. Now, again, right, when you lose a man, you've got less men inside, but like the cardinal rule when you're playing with a sweeper or playing against a sweeper is work the ball out, get it to a platform, and deliver good quality ball away from the sweeper. So it was cat.
So this kind of epitomized Kevin, I suppose, on the day he was phenomenal. But because he was so deep, because he was on a 21, it allowed him to attack the ball and not get sucked underneath it. He came from the 21 there, and because there was so much of a breeze, it was holding up in the air. And he just said, this ball is mine. In fairness, TJ got a flick in, but Kevin got it back again. And here's another example. He's back. You'll see him come into the picture. He's saying, I don't necessarily want to get too engaged because Martin Keown is in the corner, but he sees the opportunity. So he kind of engages with it slightly. He sees the ball breaking, and he's on it again. And they actually win a free here. I think this was about 70-something minutes, and he's more or less winning the ball there to make sure that they get the opportunity to try and score.
He hurled someone the ball in the second half. He was so influential. That one on Donnelly where the ball hung up and he went, lads, I felt that in the broadcast. He cleaved it in two. It was so. It was.
But because he was so far back though, Séamus. Like if anyone else was marking there, like you're not going to like engage with him. So because he was on the 21 and he was running like 10-15 yards to try and get the ball, it allowed him to like jump up and kind of hit him with his knee essentially to try and win the ball.
I know Martin Kavanagh got man the match there, but like Jeannie Mac, I genuinely did think Kevin McDonald was well up there for
he was. It was amazing.
He for that catch, he swapped hands as well. He actually went up and caught him with his right hand, and that's why TJ was out to get a flick. If he actually caught him in his left, TJ wouldn't have been able to come around and get the flick. But it was an unbelievable catch. It was the best catch I've seen in a while now.
Mm.
But there's a massive difference in those two types of extra player. So like the one that sits on the 45 and engaged with a lot of ball versus the one that's at home making sure that you don't get opened and hit for 2 or 3 goals.
Yeah, there's a difference in a sweeper. Like some sweepers are there to, so say a cornerback or fullback is just trying to prevent their man from winning the ball and he's picking up the pieces. Well, Carlow didn't seem to play that at the weekend. They were I wouldn't say letting Kilkenny win the ball, but they weren't engaging in a physical contact with Kilkenny because they didn't. They would have been a chance to step them, especially with the likes of Owen Wall. They can go past you fairly quick. So Carlow were just keeping the men outside them, prevent goals, try and keep the score down, stay in the game for as long as possible.
Mm.
Right, we better try and wrap up now before we go to the 40 minutes. People definitely don't want to listen to us for 40 minutes. It's probably a good cue to get out of here. Pleasure to have, obviously, Séamus at this stage. We're so used to it. But Bubbles, it's been really insightful to have a forward perspective, even the point you made on catching into different hands. It's an interesting point. But delighted to have you here, and we'll certainly get you on again soon. And just to remind viewers that Dean is on again today. I'm sure he'll have plenty of interesting figures around. What is it? Is it 13 in a row for Dublin? Is that what they've won since, is it 2011 or something like that? Is it 13 in a row? And then also, I suppose, Jimmy is definitely winning matches after that chaos and Clonus. So he'll probably give a good insight into that. But listen, thanks very much, lads, and really appreciate your thoughts.
Man,